Howdy, my dudes. Random Fight Fan here. Got a bit of a different idea for a build overview. This guy, Jordan, he wanted to make a more damage oriented version of the Walking Bonk build, and he wanted to do it with absolutely no glitches or exploits, anything, no game breaking bugs, no unintended interactions, so there's no like frostball explosions, no trample toast, no, nothing like that. This is just pure intended interaction. He's using it with getting avatar state and just pumping damage any way that he can. And overall, I think he did a pretty good job. But as you can see, he's got 117 million DPS after I fixed his configurations and whatnot. And it's doing pretty good. However, I felt like I could make it better. And without changing anything, I managed to get his damage up to 221 million damage per second. And I'm going to go over first what he did a little bit differently and then how I changed it to make it a little bit better. So overall, I didn't really change anything with his gear. I just changed the tree, some skills, and then with the items, I changed a small bit, like I changed his controlled metamorphosis from a large to a mid-large, and I fixed an item in his configurations. He had a Prism of Belief there instead of a Megalomaniac, so I fixed that, but I've already fixed it here. I put in his Megalo, and it's all good to go. And then I also noticed that he's got a cool node here with Pure Chaos that gives you an 11% damage as extra Chaos. Ridiculously good. However, it could be better for his Anoint, and it was definitely his Anoint on his amulet here. It is Pure Chaos, 11% damage as extra Chaos. It's great, but we have things that we could improve. So first of all, one thing I noticed on here is with him having a pretty ridiculously high crit chance on his attacks. So when we check, he's got 58.3% crit chance. Really, really nice. We were able to push out a little bit more damage by switching crit chance to crit damage, just little bits here and there. But every little bit of min-maxing obviously adds up quite high. I also removed Eternal Youth because that life recharge it doesn't really matter too much at all, really. And I want my and his energy shield to recharge, and flasks don't really do too much, especially when you're already low energy shield as well. I want to give you a little bit more quality of life. And finally, I dropped Careful Assassin because it just wasn't doing as much for you as you could with something else after the changes. Other things that I noticed, he only had 8 skills in his lineup. The 9th is Unbound Avatar. That's not actually a skill. So it was acting a little bit odd, so I just added 1 extra skill. And finally, I removed Herbalism from his skills there. And I guess I switched a few things around the tree, like saving 1 point by coming around here because you didn't need the extra crit chance with the nodes that we got for you. So overall here we went from 58% crit chance with a 765 multiplier. And yeah, just a really good looking tree. And now let's switch out to what we changed. Now obviously 221 million damage per second is a ridiculous increase in damage. So first of all, what we did there is we came through and we did the Eye of Winter tech. Now that alone is monstrous. When we take out critical weakness here, you can see the damage caves down so hard. That critical weakness making you crit almost every single time is a monster amount. I still, even without that, it's 134 million damage per second, up from 117, and that is without even talking about the other alternatives that we have to really increasing your damage here. So first of all, we kept all your stats the same except for just dropping Herbalism on your Grim Feast because we wanted you to have proper Unreserved Spirit. For whatever reason, Elemental Invocation is glitched on here and it's showing it costs 120 Spirit instead of 60. And then if you were to use Elemental Invocation with Eye of Winter and Sniper's Mark, huge damage increase against bosses. You just take off your Heralds for bossing there and rock it. I tried with Voltaic Mark, and while Voltaic Mark, which we have on this Hand of Chayula set up here, with options for Temp Chains or Enfeeble instead of Lightning Mastery, your choice for preference, it would greatly help your mapping and mobility, and Voltaic Mark is better for overall situations, but for single target against bosses, which is all you'd be using Elemental Invocation for, it wasn't as good. A little update from the future. The reason why Hand of Chayula for Voltaic is because of the big AoEs, but it also has reduced effective marks, 30% at level 20, 31% at level 19, so it's better to get it higher level if you can. Either way, it does not work as well with snipers because it's only one target, whereas the Voltaic Mark in mapping has the big explosions. Elemental Invocation does not reduce the effective mark, so it makes it even more effective with Sniper's Mark for single targets. It's very much so worth it. I had wanted to use Voltaic Mark on Elemental Invocation, however I did testing around with Sniper's Mark before and it didn't work, and I did specific testing again to see if maybe it was improved, but there's a bit of a delay for applying the mark, and when you're going around maps with the damage levels that you have, you do not ever see it activate. Everything just pops before you can activate the marks, and it's very unfortunate. So Voltaic Mark on Elemental Invocation does not work, but on Hand of Chayula, it's amazing. It feels great, it dances around, and then if you were to use the Hand of Chayula idea, you would probably also grab Way of the Wind instead of Serrated Edges for less damage but more quality of life. But like I said, this here is wanting the overall damage output, so while I gave the option for dropping Herald of Ice and using Hand of Chayula Wind Dancer instead of Elemental Invocation, this here would have absolutely no swaps ever. You already have more than enough intelligence to clear screens just with Tempest Flurry and your Herald of Thunders going off, hitting things. Like, you don't need Herald of Ice anymore. You got so much strength, or so much intelligence, it doesn't matter. And then Wind Dancer, I gave you that because I noticed on your jewels here, while they are incredible jewels that you just show the important bits on, not a single one of them has Energy Shield as stun threshold, which you don't need because your Energy Shield is only around 5,000, unfortunately. And because of that, I figured the best way to make you survivable and feel a bit better is to have Wind Dancer on there. Wind Dancer, I know, is meant for evasion, but when you don't have evasion, it still pops everything around you. Now, I don't really believe in Wind Wave on Wind Dancer because it literally does the exact same thing that Wind Dancer is already doing with the knockback. I've never seen it work, but I know when I did my initial testing, I had a broken Wind Dancer, so I'll have to do that again, but I really don't believe in Wind Wave on Wind Dancer unless I see something else to tell me otherwise. But as it stands, you'd have Energy Barrier so that when you get hit, your energy shield doesn't stop. Frost Nexus, because you're going to be freezing things, and then it's going to cause a Frost Nexus around everything that you froze and killed, so the new enemies coming into you come in slower. Maim, so that if anything does survive, when they get knocked back, they're maimed and chilled on frosted ground, so you are very likely not going to get hit by the time your stun ends. And then inevitable critical, because they probably don't have the crazy high crit chance against them with Eye of Winter because you're using this setup instead. Now, if you are using this setup, I know it says 214 on there, but you don't actually have critical weak here. You would have an extra bunch of shock effect though. So you'd still be at 137 million DPS, which is still a massive increase from the 117. And then you'd be having more mobile mapping for sure with Hand of Chayula, but you wouldn't be having the chain explosions with the double heralds, although it is a lot more damage, and I actually quite like dashing around. It's just, with this setup, we are not going into your original thought process of let's go and nuke everything as hard as possible. So let's go back to this configuration, put back on critically weak, boom. Wait, what? Shocks went off for some odd reason. Weird. Anyways, you got your shock effect, you got your critical weakness, you got your crazy high damage. Your elemental invocation could have whatever for Eye of Winter. It doesn't really matter. You could put whatever you want in there. But this here is definitely the more mapping friendly and survivable option with taking off Herald of Ice. And this here is moving into the obscene damage fantasy that you seem to be wanting to go for. Now, what I went on here for the swapping is I came around here because with your configuration you can check you'll have 88% crit chance, which I was hoping to get a little bit higher, but as it stands, I found this was multiple million more damage per second than coming this way. So you're only losing 10% crit chance, and this 36% increased damage if you dealt a crit recently, but you gain about 15 strength because of all your multipliers on there. 30% increased attack damage, so you're 6% less, but you're getting way more from the strength, and 10% crit chance. It is very, very much so worth it. And we achieved that by swapping your controlled metamorphosis to a medium large one. I copied and pasted mine in here, except for I swapped it down to the minus 5% all res because that's what you had. I would suggest with your controlled metamorphosis to get a corrupted one. Possibly stats would be better because you already had capped resistances. And then take your nodes this way so you can get your Wildstorm and Serrated Edges. Or if you wanted to do the Henta Triangular, like I said, Way of the Wind, incredible. I had initially thought coming for the critical chance instead of the increased damage would be better, but because the crit chance is so high, it stops being as important, apparently, and this 20% increased damage is better. I did not expect that. Obviously kept the same resonance tech, so you don't need to pump your own charges anyway. I swapped over your crit chance over for crit damage, and we dropped Careful Assassin because with how much crit chance you have, it actually loses you damage taking it, which is highly surprising. But overall, very, very strong. Obviously, we no longer have Eternal Youth. I'm not a big fan of it. And we rebalanced everything to better balance your strength and intelligence. This here is the most damage I'd seen, and this is even without using an Astramentis amulet. Obviously, like I said there, I forgot to mention, you had Pure Chaos on there, which was incredible. But it does not compare if you can handle the mana cost to Barbaric Strength. That 45% increased critical damage versus 10 strength. When we tried this, I guess I have to find it here. When we do the Anoint Chaos, Pure Chaos. When we test Pure Chaos against Barbaric Strength, we go from 221 to your Pure Chaos down to 208 million. Barbaric Strength is just way, way too strong for your build right now. I feel like since it's not corrupted, you have nothing to lose. You should definitely swap out this way. But yeah, as you can see, absolutely ridiculous damage increases, and this build was put in a little while ago, and I assume you have a lot more currency now. And so while we play in with your existing skills and whatnot, I wanted to show you what your damage numbers would be like if you took my ideas, kept the same balancing of the tree in mind, I should save that, and added Astramentis. If you were strong enough, we brought it up to nearly 300 million damage per second. And literally all I did was copy and paste in my Astramentis and put in Barbaric Strength. While this has a positive Corrupt, it is going to be... It's not necessary, but it was a nice little add-on to your already ridiculous tree and ridiculous skills and everything. And yeah, adding Barbaric Strength to that with your skills brought it to 300 million damage per second naturally. No glitches, no breaks, nothing. This is just what you have going in your Bell, your Tempest Flurry, and Culling, and your Shockwave, I guess, which would definitely be accounted if you're able to keep that up for a boss. It is crazy, crazy strong. I like what you have. I would not play this, though, because it's only 4,600 energy shield, whereas my build right now has over 9,000, and I like a little more defensive playstyle because you can't DPS when you're dead, but overall for your damage fantasy, this is quite beautiful. You did a great job, and with the obvious increase of that crazy amulet, I think this is very much so worth it for you. You already have the From Nothing for Resonance, which is more expensive than the amulet, so I assume you'll be able to afford it. Either way, I guess I forgot to mention one thing. With the reduced nodes from Careful Assassin here in Eternal Youth. I put it into Overflowing Power because you're already using Charge Infusion. There's no reason not to come here with the 60% increased critical damage, and then with the 2 extra maximum power charges that you would get for the 2 charges onto your charge staff, it brings your damage up ridiculously high. That's 10 million on this setup, and then the 60% crit damage is another 30 million right there, or 20 million right there. It is crazy. And then with, don't need to save that, with your normal setup here with the upgrades, again 10 million straight up there, and then these 3 are like 15 million. It's an insane amount of damage, this node here, when you're using Charge Infusion, which you are. And I would highly, highly recommend putting this on. It's crazy good. But yeah, 221 to 300 million damage per second for your Power Fantasy build with no glitches, no nothing. You could take down anything on your first bell. You could do a 6-man Zesht and take him down yourself on 2 bells. That is before he ever casts an ability. Yeah. This is pretty crazy, pretty ridiculous. I like the damage fantasy. I am not a big fan of the low energy shield, but overall this here is incredible, and you had an idea in mind, and I think we ran with it, and great job. I like this. You did great. Thank you again, Jordan. And to all the other dudes, thank you for stopping by. If you liked it, like the video and sub. If you didn't, don't. Either way, I appreciate you all. Thank you for coming by, and see you.